Well, Nick, welcome to this here episode on modern day Apocrypha.
Yeah, excited to get started. This is an exciting one that I think we've been planning for a few weeks now.
Yeah. It's an interesting take on an overdone topic.
Tell us what that topic is.
So it's the pandemic impact on the 9 to 5. And so a couple of things that we'll talk about today is just how all the different aspects of American 9 to 5 culture, kind of around like office stuff, and then which just kind of branches out from there. But what we're not going to get into is maybe how it started or who's responsible or any of that mess. Maybe we'll get courageous enough to tackle that on a different episode. But for now, we're just talking about the impacts of it. So
yeah, definitely. And I think one of the interesting ideas here is, you know, as people have been shifting to working from home, or those who at least have the opportunity to do that, you know, that definitely doesn't apply to everybody. But
for sure,
for those that can work from home, those businesses are certainly moving away from the office space. And I think it's going to be an interesting case study here to see if this is a trend that continues through 2022, 23. You know, is this a long-term issue? And if so, there are a lot of industries sustained by people commuting in and out of your downtown areas. And I think that that's really going to have a pretty significant impact on the businesses and the commerce that's sustained by that. And then, you know, we've got a couple other things that I think might be impacted by this issue with COVID, kind of relevant and related to that downtown issue. So, yeah, I think it's definitely going to be an interesting one, and excited to just explore this topic and learn about different ideas here that might be impacted as a result.
Yeah, same. So I think the best way to kind of do this is to do like a compare contrast. So I know sometimes I'm so used to like life now as is. And I work from home, you're working from home. But prior to that, we were in the office every day, Monday through Friday. And so that pre-pandemic experience was everyone was going into 9 to 5 at the office, Monday through Friday. The majority of office workers now currently have transitioned to work from home. And I know when we originally left, at least what our company had told us was, hey, this will be just a couple of weeks. Well, now we are, 6 months out. I think I heard we're not going back until the end of the year. So, I mean, this is kind of normal now, right?
Right. Oh, certainly. I mean, you hear the term thrown around. It's the new normal, quote unquote.
For sure.
And it certainly feels that way. At first, I don't think that it did to many of us. You know, I recognize that there is a strong sense of community at the start of all of this. People were checking on each other. Hey, do you have food? Do you have, you know, essentials? And now it's just kind of gone back to, well, normal life, hence the new normal, I think. So
right.
It's interesting to see that unfold as we start getting further and further into this being our typical life.
Yeah, absolutely. To kind of validate the whole idea that, you know, work at home might be a bigger reality in future moving forward. You know, some of the companies that we had on here, I just did a little bit of research. I mean, like, transparency, 30-second Google search, just to see, you know, like, am I onto anything here, right?
Well, that almost tells you how big this is, because you can do 30 seconds of research and find a list of companies that are working from home.
Right. Just a couple call outs here. One of them was Nationwide. Obviously, that's a pretty big company. No pun intended there. But they said moving forward, they're at a permanent hybrid work from home model, meaning they're only having a couple offices open and everyone else moving forward is going to be working from home. I know that 𝗟𝗏, who is real big as far as people as investing and stuff like that, back in March, he had said that shorting commercial real estate was one of his biggest bets for 2020. So if we're thinking now everyone's going to be moving to work from home, and you've got somebody who's known for seeing the stock market and all of those trends, and he's like, man, commercial real estate, that's going down, let's short that. Shit. That says a lot for the future. Yeah, it doesn't feel good for the hopes of all that commercial real estate. To counter that, which I tend to have that same mindset that this is a trend that's definitely going to take its toll.
But I listened to another lady. I think she was out of the University of Central Florida, maybe.
Sure.
But she was a professor, and she had been studying this exact issue. And I thought that it was interesting because her take was that the downtown areas, the cities, were kind of a melting pot of everybody coming together. And while I think she's right in the sense that that's how cities in the downtown areas evolved, well, my view is that now with the virtual communication platforms that we've got, like Zoom, or if you're using Skype, I think most of us are on Zoom or something of that nature.
Right.
You know, you don't need the physical space to have that melting pot and the conglomeration of all these different ideas. So anyway, she was hedging her bets that we were going to return to pretty normal levels of commuting that we were used to pre-COVID.
Well, I think eventually we'll get back there, but
Sure.
How long will it take? And I think the longer this goes on and the longer this gets solidified as normal, the more hesitant people are going to be to return to a previous version of normal.
Especially those that don't have to.
Right.
I know a lot of people, and myself included, I've really enjoyed being able to work from home because I can do things around the house. I can do a load of laundry, and sure, that takes me away from work for 5 minutes, but I'm productive for that hour that it's going in the machine. Whereas all of that stuff used to have to be concentrated into the, after 5 o'clock whenever I get home. And it's like, well, man, I got to stay here and take care of my chores around the house. I can't go out and do things. But now I feel a little bit liberated being able to get the chores done while I'm working also.
Yeah.
And still have life.
I haven't worn pants in 6 months.
This is brilliant. Are you wearing pants right now?
I mean, shorts. Like, it's in the office. Like, you can't wear shorts as a dude in the office. At least not the place that I work.
And we're pretty casual.
And we are pretty casual, but still, like, pants are the standard.
Sure.
So yeah, I don't want to give up my shorts, man.
It's too comfy.
And commuting, like, can we talk about commuting for a minute? Like, not having to waste 15, 30 minutes one way just to go to work.
Oh yeah, easy.
Like, that's 30 to an hour a day that I get back on my own time. You said to do those chores, even if, you're not breaking it up for those 5-10 minutes walks you'd take away from your desk in the office. Now it's 5 minutes to go switch over the laundry, or I've been able to do some crazy things like everyone else, starting to bake sourdough bread. And it's real easy. They're small, tiny little steps that you do once an hour, once every 30 minutes for 30 seconds.
You said, like everybody else, baking sourdough bread. Is that a trend now?
Well, since people got stuck at home, it's been a trend.
Is it? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. You talk about that morning commute, and I agree. That's one of my favorite things about being able to work from home is not having to deal with the morning commute. And also just being able to almost unwind in the morning. Like, it's kind of the stress, your alarm clock goes off. And for me, I wake up at, God bless, the absolute last second that I possibly can and still get to work on time, right?
Right.
And I'm certainly not one of those people that sits down and, as archaic as this is, but reads the newspaper,
Sure.
for lack of a better phrase.
Sure.
And so it's been nice because, I can do the things that I need to do, and I'll sit out on my patio and just kind of enjoy a little bit of nature. It's nice and cool in the mornings, have a cup of coffee, and it's relaxing. It's a great way to get started. So I'm definitely not missing out on that commute. I don't know if we even intended on talking about this, but you and I had talked about this just throughout the series of planning this podcast in and of itself. It's kind of an interesting time to start a podcast because, at least for me, I've stopped listening to, I probably listen to half as many podcasts as I used to because I don't have that morning and evening commute anymore.
I know. That's kind of a hilarious topic that here we are semi counterproductive of like, hey, we're talking about how the world doesn't have this time to sit around and listen to people like us talk. Let's start talking and have people listen to us. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a good transition into all the other things that are affected. Like we've talked a little bit about the commute. Entertainment has changed, right? I know that's not so much in your typical 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, but I know lots of corporations and stuff will do like office parties, offsites, stuff like that. You can't right now. The best you can do is bring somebody into a Zoom room. And that, I mean, how do you adapt as an axe throwing place? You can't virtually throw an axe like, hey, I want to have this guy put a camera on and then throw it. Like, no one's going to pay for that. Like, there's no way you can convert that.
Right, all these team building exercises and such. I mean, you almost lose that sense of corporate community, you might say.
Sure.
It's hard without the face-to-face to stay engaged with everybody, and that was certainly a big hurdle to overcome and start getting adapted to. And you're absolutely right. There are so many different things that our company would do for us. We work for a relatively large company, and they treat us well, and they give back to their employees and give us opportunities to get together and go out and have drinks. Or you mentioned axe throwing. That's something that our team did. I don't know if you were able to do that.
No, I've heard a lot of teams doing it. I've not done it personally.
It's just a lot of fun, and you get to know your coworkers a little bit better, and it feels a little more relaxed, casual, personable, so that you're building those relationships. And I think that fosters a better community at work, and that's going to retain the employees. And so from a work perspective, not being able to have those different team building exercises is going to be a challenge for a lot of managers.
Okay. So I didn't expect to go here, but since we're here, how do we solve that? Right. You can only do happy hours through Zoom so many different ways. Right. And you can't, it's not as easy like to get everyone in a room and break off and have separate conversations. I've not seen a good way for that to happen in a digital space. And I know when you're in person, happy hour, music, something, you're more relaxed, nothing's recorded. So if you're wanting to have something, maybe of more of like a fringe conversation that you're like, man, I don't want this to be recorded on the work stuff, but it's building those relationships that help grease things when you go back into the office on Monday morning. How do you solve for that? Because people are going to be less likely to put that in your Slack, your Microsoft Teams, whatever.
Right, where everything's recorded is what you're saying.
Right, because there's always there's a record of it. How do we solve for that? How do we keep that grease moving when you can't get 50 people in a room that can break off and have a bunch of little conversations?
Yeah, kind of the water cooler aspect of it.
100%.
It's nice because I have those relationships with the people that I see every day in the office in a traditional sense. I get to know them through that water cooler mentality. You're going to put your lunch in the refrigerator in the morning and you run into 2 or 3 people and you just catch up for 5 or 10 minutes. I used to practice Spanish with one of the guys that we used to work with in the office, and every day, I just start talking to him, and he knows that I'm trying to practice. Yeah, Marco.
Love that dude. I miss him.
He's great. And, he'd call me out on whenever I was completely wrong, but it was great because I got to learn something.
Yeah.
But I think that's definitely something that nobody's really figured out yet, is how to replace that sense of community, the organic conversation that happened throughout the day with those that sit around you or work around you, whatever your office style is. But I will say for us, one of the things that my specific team has tried to do is just find different ways of virtual engagement. So you mentioned happy hours, and that's certainly what this started off as.
Yeah.
It's like in the beginning, the first couple of weeks, it was, hey, let's have a couple drinks. We don't really have to talk about work, but let's just catch up, see how everybody's doing. Nice to have some FaceTime, even if it is virtual. Mm-hmm. But now we've started doing like different games and playing Heads Up. The phone app and different things like that. But even that, it's not really addressing the core of the problem, which is that there's no real face-to-face interaction.
So I don't think anyone planned for this to go on as long as it's gone on. And now that we're where we're at, going, oh shit, maybe this is going to go on for as long as it has or longer, from where we're at moving forward. Maybe somebody will start to think about, how do we solve that issue? How do we solve that community? Because I think the digital formats is easy to sustain for a short time, relationships that have already been built. But I'm just trying to think back personally and make sure I'm being honest. I don't think I've really built a lot of new connections like the way I would have back in the office.
Oh, sure. 100%. I think that it's kind of been... It's been challenging to even maintain those connections, let alone make new connections. We hired a new guy on our team, and he's, I feel like I don't even know him. I see him on our meeting once a week, our little happy hour where we play some games and stuff.
Sure.
But beyond that, like there's no team builder to get to know him. I don't sit next to him, so I can't just shoot the shit and talk to him and figure out what he's up to.
Hey, let's grab lunch. And then you pivot from work convo to people convo. And oh, wow.
The actual stuff that we care about.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Not the stuff we're paid to care about, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And while we're kind of talking about the general space here, one of the things that I noticed that you had done some exploration on is the subsidiary or secondary businesses that are propped up, not just so much the events and the team building like what we've been talking about, but like office supplies. I've heard that a lot of the like Clorox wipes, they had a really good quarter because everybody was going to get those personal little wipes and stuff, but their business sector has just plummeted.
Well, yeah, no one's in the office.
Yeah, that you don't have a custodian going around and cleaning all the time. I think we did for the first couple weeks, but I'm sure after that we were like, hey, there's really no need. And so that's not good for the economy. That puts people out of business as well. And it's definitely tough.
So if you're Clorox, how do you adapt right now? I mean, obviously you shift and you're big enough, you're going to be fine. But if you're that sector, do you keep betting and going, it's okay. This is going to come back around. It's going to be fine, guys. Or, you start to see every month that this drags on, you see more and more people going, all right, we close shop.
Yeah, and you just throw in the towel. Well, if you're Clorox and you're a bad company, not saying that Clorox is, but if you do not have integrity, then you do something to make your products not last as long so that people have to go buy more. That kind of reminds me of like what Apple did with their battery life and the software updates, where they would intentionally not allow your phone to continue getting those improvements.
Hey, it's been one cycle. You're fine. You're coming up against two? Nah, bro, you need a new phone.
Yep, that's a wrap. Well done, you made it.
Yeah. Well, even greater office supplies. Like, I think they might have been struggling already just because things have been shifting to like a digital space. But then they don't even have like chairs and shit aren't being sold right now.
Right.
Sure, I'm sure some places are, but a lot of things are probably paused and going, well, how does this shake out? Maybe we just stay virtual. And I think if I'm an individual buying a chair, I'm probably going to spend $200, maybe $300, depending on my income, as opposed to am I right in remembering these were like $800-900 chairs that we had at work?
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. Okay. So corporations have that kind of money. And I don't think if they're shifting to save money that they're going to start sending $800 chairs to people's houses.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking the other direction, honestly.
Okay. Fire away.
So one of the things that I noticed for the first, I'd say 3 months that we were working from home and still kind of feeling out this environment that we're now in, the new normal.
Maybe that's what we call this episode, the new normal.
The new normal, yeah.
I dig it.
Very well
All
could
right.
be. So anyway, we started off by getting a little grace period where you could go in, collect your things, anything that you felt like you needed. But then outside of that, there was no fun to go purchase a monitor or those items like you're talking about with chairs and things like that.
Right.
I think if this trend continues, then more companies are going to adopt what our business has done and allowing people to have a budget to go purchase items for their homes. Whether that's a monitor, maybe it's, docking stations. Would they go as far to give you a desk? I don't know, probably not. But if they're already expensing the $800-900 chairs, the nice ergonomic ones, I could see a company that has the funds. That's really a key part here.
For sure.
To be able to go and give people those chairs so that it makes it a little bit more comfortable.
So think that through, right? I know with like hardware, like monitors, laptops, desktops, webcams, shit like that, it makes sense to get that back, right? For the most part, they're small and easier to store. But now you're talking about chairs, man, and then shipping on something like that.
Right.
And if you're dropping that kind of a price point on it, when somebody leaves and you're in an office space, that chair is there for like 20 years, give or take. Now, if I get an employee and he's here for a year and then he quits, how much money do I have to spend to either ship that chair back or reinvest and buy a whole new chair for whoever the replacement is?
Mm-hmm.
Like that in and of itself doesn't seem sustainable.
Right. Oh, certainly. Unless you factor in the savings that they might have from not having the office space.
Okay.
And so if you make that commitment to just cut out the office, I mean, what's commercial real estate go for? Let's take a look. We're here in Nashville, Tennessee, so we'll just take a look at our specific region.
Yeah, for sure. And while you're pulling that up, I'm going to see if I can pull up all of our social media stuff to tell people to go look at. So if you haven't connected with us yet on social media, it's in here somewhere.
Yeah, it looks like $65 a square foot using standard finishes. It says more than 65. So if you call that 70 bucks a square foot, that's expensive. And that's each month.
But put that into context, because I've never looked at real estate and condensed it to that. So for someone like me who was like, oh, cute, $65 a foot, what does that mean? Put that in how much a month am I paying for an average office building?
Yeah, well, I don't know, because I don't know how many square feet our building is, but if I had to guess.
Well, how many square feet is your house?
This house, 1,800.
So 1,800. So
and keep in mind that's the bonus room upstairs included in that. So I'd say that we've got an easy 50,000 at minimum, I would say.
And that's a big place, all right? So 50,000, you said times 65, and that's a month? Damn. Okay, so you're right. That is hella expensive. Are you doing that math right now?
Yeah, that's 3.25 million.
A month?
Yeah, let's take a look at that and confirm. Because that's a lot for 1 month.
What if they give you a bulk discount?
I wonder if that's purchasing.
Oh, okay.
Let's see.
That actually seems more accurate.
But regardless, for that space though, $3.25 million.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's a ton. So here's, well, you factor in zoning too. So
Sure.
We may not get this exact answer right here live on the podcast, but just for reference, I'm seeing less than 1 acre lot. Just a lot, no building, 2.95 million.
What about renting?
So yeah, that's what I was hoping that we would find, because I think that's what most businesses are doing is renting.
Right.
So average rent for commercial real estate.
Yeah, because I'm very curious to know, because if we're really talking that crazy amount of money that you're not paying in, that's just a building. That's your utilities probably aren't even covered in that. And then you've got your janitorial staff that's probably not covered in that. Plus then, stuff like coffee and condiments and paper plates. And yeah, that adds up quick.
Yeah, so I'm just using the quick drop downs on Google.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that this is specific to Nashville per se, but it says that for the lease space, a 2,200 square foot office space is quoted around $1,150 per square foot.
Okay.
So we'll call that $12.
Yeah.
Either way, $12 times 50,000. Let's see what that comes out to.
It's like 120,000.
600,000. So that's still $600,000 a month for a space the size that we're renting, and that's one floor, mind you.
Yeah.
And we've got 4 floors?
Something like that.
5 maybe.
Spaced out. So
that's massive.
So $600,000 a month. If you were not spending that, you're probably reallocating and reinvesting that at least up front in, like you said, desks and stuff like that. Yeah, that does pay to actually just take the loss on reinvesting it if someone's around for, I'm sure there's smart people who know how to numbers better than I do. to know, okay.
We're not mathematicians or economists, let's be clear.
Yeah, please don't sue us. That's actually a lot of extra cash to play around with, just so that people don't have a place to sit if they're doing that on their own. Okay, I see the number sense.
But see, you've got to make that commitment too, though, because right now, like we're 6 months in, and it's like
it's attractive.
It's
right
not
now.
looking up per se, but is it going to be a year-long issue? Is it worth going in and moving all of your corporate stuff out only to move it back in a year later? I don't know. That's a good question.
And I know that, at least in our business, productivity has stayed the same or increased. But what's the long-term look on that, right? Is it, oh, everyone's scared because the economy's shaky right now, and there's this great big question mark about the future that makes people go, ooh, I need to do 10, 20, 30% more just to make sure I keep my job and make sure that I stay stable. Is that what that push is? Or is it really the flexibility from working at home that's being sustained? Like, I don't think we've had enough time to answer those questions.
I think you're absolutely right. And kind of tangential to that, one of the guys that's on our creative design team has worked from home the entire time that I've known him. Mm-hmm. And now that everybody started working from home, he kind of filled me in on what his ins and outs were. And one of the things that he was worried about was the perception of working from home is that you're less productive. That's just a general perception.
It absolutely is.
So he was like, look, I got to work like an extra hour on top of what I had prior to like staying in the office just to maintain that level of perception and that level of productivity, even though he's still accomplishing more than what the rest of us are.
So it's a lot about bullshit and perceptions than it is about actual what's going on.
Sure. I'm sure that plays into it.
Yeah.
Now that everybody's in the same boat, though, that may not hold up.
Of course. But at least from some of the small perspective that we have, that makes sense.
Yeah. One of the other things that I thought was interesting was this idea of people staying local. So I don't know how you are because you're a little bit closer to Nashville. Mm-hmm. But for those listening, I'm about 35 minutes north of Nashville. And for me, I used to go down, make my commute in the mornings, and then I had a lot of friends in Nashville, or that's where the restaurants are. Tony, I'd go hang out with my friend Tony.
That was for the video. I forgot this is a podcast.
If you've heard anything, he's a good guy. And, so after work, I'd go hang out with my friends or do some things that I needed to do downtown, like specific buildings that I'd have to go purchase some things from that I could only get in the city. And now I find myself like, I'll go load up on groceries so I don't have to leave the house for a long period of time. And it kind of sucks because I miss being able to go out and have that change of scenery. But on the flip side, I save a lot on gas. I save a lot on time. I'm paying more attention to my house itself. And I didn't really start appreciating my home until it had to be literally my home.
Right.
And I was quarantined here for a few weeks.
Not just the place you sleep and do your laundry.
Right. That's definitely what it felt like. And, going out all the time it's costly.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I know you and I, we were going out a lot pre-pandemic. And so that being out multiple times a week for me, at least every other weekend, if not every weekend, just super social and like enjoying people and going doing whatever, whether that be, hanging downtown, bar hopping or hiking. I mean, we've been able to sustain some of that stuff, like the kayaking and hiking. But that was a rough transition going from, I see people all day, every day, plus 2-3 nights a week and on the weekends to I'm in my home and I only see pictures of people.
Yeah. And it only happened over the span of 2 weeks, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely an abrupt change. You were talking about the kayaking and hiking and things like that. And it got me thinking that one of the things that I just brought up was sitting outside with a cup of coffee and I've got some just woods behind my house. And so I can watch what's going on with the nature, whether it's birds or deer or whatever it is coming through there. And it's kind of making me realize that I've gotten a lot more in touch with the natural side of life.
Sure.
And that feels a little more wholesome.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I completely agree. Just today, I shifted from my normal duties where I need to be like creating a whole bunch of stuff to helping out with a different project. And I was able to sit in my laptop the past like 2-3 days outside on my front porch, manning a chat system that needed some extra help for the past couple of days. And it's like, man, I wouldn't do this at the office. Even if I needed to help and do the exact same thing, I would be sitting at my desk, helping out, doing what I'd be doing. But I don't know. There's a lot of upsides, but there's definitely a lot of uncertainty and all those different industries that I'm curious to see how they adapt. Should they adapt? Because sometimes it's good for things to continue growing. Like shit needs to get pruned, and that's healthy, right? So even though it's sad to see a lot of these businesses closing, you know, that have been around maybe 20, 30 years or however long, I know some of that's healthy and just part of like life to be pruned, but
yeah, on that note, and we may touch on this when we start talking about some of the economic topics that we've outlined. But on that note about pruning industry, I agree. I think it's kind of an inevitability, just like a wildfire comes in and it destroys all of the old forest to allow for new growth.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that will happen here. But I think the question is, like, that concept is good if it applies to businesses that were not managed well, right? Because those are the ones that you kind of expect, or you want to fail, not,
it's healthy die off. It's not
right.
It's allowing the weak, sickly stuff to give room for healthier stuff.
Right.
But I think what you're getting at is we don't want the healthy shit to die.
Exactly. And so, like, you know, Nashville has a vibrant downtown central area. And some of those businesses down there, I was listening to the owner of Honky Tonk, which is, for anybody that's been to Nashville, it's just a wild country bar.
Wild is an understatement.
Yes. Multi-level, very much a tourist trap, you might say. But
if that's your scene, worth checking out.
Yes. Yeah.
One day when we can go back.
If you come to Nashville and you're buying cowboy boots, you should go to Honky Tonk. Let's just leave it at that.
Anyways, off with the derail. You
Or
were
a bachelorette. But yeah, so the owner, I think he said that he had been in business for 30, maybe it was even 40 years down there.
Wow.
And now, because it's classified as a bar, well, he doesn't get the same privileges that the restaurants get. And so he's got to stay closed. I'm sure his rent is through the roof, being right there on Broadway, downtown Nashville. It's an expensive place to maintain, especially if you're not getting any income. And so he obviously had a business model that was working. He had sustained it for 30 or 40 years. Regardless of what you think about the business itself, it seems that it is a well-run business and it should continue to thrive.
Yeah, I don't know how we fix that, right? I mean, because obviously giving stuff time to let it settle is important, but how do we sustain some of these? And maybe that just comes into like, different approach of government funding to try to keep things supported that are worth being supported, instead of maybe just free-flowing money to the wind and going, hope it helps. But that's a different topic. What else we got on this list? I know we've covered quite a bit already.
Yeah, well, I think we've dabbled around it a little bit. We talked about some of the secondary industries that feed off of the office space, but restaurants are one of the big things here.
How have we not talked about restaurants yet?
Yeah, and I mean, we were talking about the Honky Tonk example as an extension of, just healthy die-off versus unhealthy die-off of business. But when you think about the restaurant industry, how many of those restaurants are supported only by the people coming into the area because they're commuting from out of town, like myself? I drive 30 minutes away. These are not restaurants that I go to on a regular basis. I go to the places that are 5 minutes away from my house.
Sure.
Not 35 or 40 minutes away. And so they've lost my business, and I'm sure they've lost thousands of other customers. And, just a couple examples. Joey's House of Pizza. Anybody that comes to Nashville, definitely check that out. Hope that they're able to make it through this. But what's interesting about them, and the reason I bring them up, is because they have a business model where they're open from, I think it's like 11 to 1 or 10 to 1, something like that. So they're very obviously targeting just the lunch rush.
Right.
And they make awesome pizzas, so they're able to sustain their entire business in that 3-hour time period. Granted, it's really busy and hectic when you go in there, but how wonderful is that for them? They get the other 5 hours, I wouldn't say to themselves, because I know that there's preparation and cleaning and all of that, but they're definitely targeting the people who come into the commercial areas, the office buildings, and I'm sure they're taking an impact on that.
Yeah, the only time I've had Joey's Pizza, I think it was the Gladiator or something that we had, and I didn't understand that this was something to be respected and not taken lightly. I did not understand what the term meat sweats meant until I had the Gladiator at Joey's Pizza. Yeah, it was intense, man. But anyways, yes, all of these
Can we just pause there?
Sure.
I just want the audience to get this like visual of what this pizza is. So you go up and you say, yeah, I'll take the Gladiator. And the first time that you go in there, they've got a pretty succinct menu, but it's so busy that as soon as you get up to the station, you better be ready with your order because you're going to the back of the line. Like you just got to recycle. It's just that level of busyness. But you get the Gladiator and it comes on 2 plates. The pizza, one slice of pizza, it's the slice, is so large and fat and heavy and delicious that they need 2 plates to support it. And for anybody listening, it's a pizza baked inside of a pizza.
It's a lot.
Stacked with pepperonis on both levels of the pizza.
Yeah, and like their sausage is like the size of a normal person's meatball. It's just so much. Like I've actually never been in there. It was maybe a year or 2 ago. We had a pretty consistent game night, and one of our coworkers, you remember Joey?
Mm-hmm. Not the owner, but another friend, Joey.
Friend Joey went to Joey's Pizza, for anyone listening. And so we were at his place playing some games and had the pizza, and it was like all 4 of us were like, oh, this is so much. Mistakes were made. And I think we each got like 2 slices. And yeah.
Did you finish?
I ate more than 1 in the first sitting. And after that night, I was like, hey, who wants my second slice? I ain't never doing this again. I can't do it.
No, it's a hard pass.
It was freaking tasty. Don't get me wrong. But it is too much.
It's so much. It's so much.
Respect it. Take your time. 2 bites is okay.
But yeah, shout out to our friends at Joey's House of Pizza.
Yeah. Bringing us back, how is this whole thing going to impact those lunch-only places, right? So I think restaurants as a whole, depending on their location, I think there's been some nostalgia or habits that people want. So they'll either do like the curbside thing and go get the food that they love and that they're used to having, even if they aren't downtown. You might, if there's something you're missing, you might go make that trip, but it's now once a month, once every couple of months, once a quarter versus, oh yeah, I hit this place once a week. And so obviously that's a huge drop in income. Can they sustain, and maybe the businesses can sustain, but they have to cut their staff by 70%. So sure, the business is there, but it's not as healthy and thriving as it once was.
And that's where you start seeing the broader economic impact of this. Yeah, it's definitely a tough situation to be in. And, my mind immediately went to, well, you got to diversify your business. And I was like, well, how do you do that as a restaurant?
Sure.
Oh, you do catering. Oh, well, hey, you can't really do that either. Like you don't have parties. There aren't large gatherings. And to your point earlier, when we kind of kicked this episode off, there aren't any lunch catering established by the businesses, by the offices.
Well, even think about that. If you're a catering only business, like I know there's been, several here in town, sure. At least there's a place all over the place. How do you adapt? Right? So you're used to getting 200 lunches prepped, ready, and delivered to one location. In our current model, it's just not possible to take 200 lunches and get them to 200 locations, because now what you were used to doing and prepping, and you have to add a whole delivery fleet to that. And unless you're trying to become Amazon, that's just not feasible.
So, maybe that's where we're starting to see the rise of third-party businesses like Uber Eats.
Okay.
And, I've when this whole pandemic first started kicking in, it only took about a week for DoorDash to be running promotions and Uber Eats to be running promotions. They know that they've got to get people's business now.
Get them in the habit of it.
Exactly. Because that's how you're going to continue making that profits. And so I think that's one thing that really differentiated Uber from Lyft is Lyft didn't have this strong food delivery service that Uber did. And so, as soon as the pandemic hit, sure, I'm sure people are not taking nearly as many Uber rides, but Uber Eats is able to, carry the weight now because more people are using those services. We've got a food service here called premium food service, I think is what it's called. Premium food delivery. That's what it is. And it serves, just my county. It's super small.
Okay. I was like, I've never heard of this. What is this? Tell me, Nick.
Local business. But, I used to see one or two of their little cars. They've got the little, you might call it like a little pizza light on top of your car, the little magnetic thing that you stick up there.
So is it just like the equivalent of like an Uber Eats, but only just like a small locality?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And so really cool that, he had been running that for at least a year or two that I've lived up here. But now I see every day I'm seeing like 3 or 4 of those cars driving around because people are using it so much more. And I've started using it a lot more. Mm-hmm. And so I try to support the local business and use premium food delivery.
Does it look like those old school Pizza Hut toppers?
100%.
Because I swear, as I was driving up here tonight, I saw out of the corner of my eye, and I was like, "That's a weird topper." But I'm, trying to get here because I was running late, and
it's totally retro.
I didn't pay attention to what it was, so I did see it. That's super cool.
Yeah, and so it's kind of interesting because you're starting to see, you talked about the growth issue, businesses going out of business allows for new growth. Mm-hmm. And this might be one of those opportunities where that sector, the delivery services, get more growth opportunities now.
Okay. So let's think about, I know we were talking about, like your office Monday, American 9 to 5. As we shift and maybe potentially solidify more into a socially distanced culture or a more at-home culture where stuff is delivered to us either through Amazon, food delivery services. Man, I can't remember the last time I've really gone into a store other than a grocery store for anything since all this happened. Like I'll go to Target to grab something, but otherwise it's like, I'll just Amazon it. I'm sitting at home anyways. There's no rush. As that happens, how do we solve for community, right? Because I know when I'm in the office, right, you can see somebody who's, in their body language, you catch it in their tone. It's a lot easier to hide through Zoom, mm-hmm. right? You can't always catch that. And typically when the meeting's done, you can turn it off. Or if you're having a real bad day, my camera's off. And now if it's not a meeting that they speak up or they only speak up, it's the time you're wearing the mask is so short, so it's so easy to put that little bit of energy into I'm doing just fine. How do we solve for that?
Well, that's a really great point. It kind of goes back to those face-to-face in-person interactions, and maybe on a subconscious level, that's why people crave the face-to-face conversation so much more than doing things over Zoom.
Because they can't hide.
Yeah, and if I'm doing a sales pitch, for example, why is it that our company will pay $1,000, whatever the cost is, to put you up in a hotel for 2 nights, pay for a round trip flight, the food, the per diem, etc.? That's a lot of money when you could do something over Zoom and share the same materials and have ultimately the same presentation. You can relay or convey the same information that you would in person. But maybe that's why we pay the cost that we do and why we think it's worth it, is so that you can see that body language and you can get that, you called it a sense of community.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost, not to get too woo-woo, but it's energy, right? There's a different energy when you're in person. We have great phone conversations, whether it's on the phone or in person, but I'd rather sit and have a conversation with you in person.
There's nothing that replaces it.
Yeah, nothing. So in a world where it's, regardless of your take, whether you think it's not safe or not socially acceptable or whatever, it's not normal or as normal for us to be in person the way we used to be. How do we solve for that? And I think you can do it in a one-on-one scale, right? Minimizing your contact and whatever. But how do you do it in a group? You know what I mean?
It's always roll of the dice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely one for us to figure out. What we need are avatars. We just upload our consciousness into this old body. Like, it's okay if it gets sick, or maybe it can't even get sick. We'll call it what it is.
Are you talking about like that, like the blue people on Pandora Avatar movie?
Yeah, the Avatar movie. Yeah.
Man, if that technology was real, I don't even know. And didn't they say it was
Come on,
like
Elon.
$12 trillion or something like that, just to fuse your DNA with this other alien DNA? Like, even if it was just human to human, and that's our solve for Man, we got into a weird place. But even still, like, I'm still laying at home and my consciousness is now in the body of something else, that it's okay if that gets sick and dies because I can just make another one. Man, that's like some Black Mirror shit right there.
It becomes disposable. And then, that can bleed over into like warfare or so many different applications. The guys who go up on those power lines and do the repairs, and, there's like a huge risk of electrocution, or maybe you're one of those guys that climbs some of those telephone tower antennas. And you could replace yourself and all the risk involved with just some avatar that goes and does it.
Yeah, I wonder if your brain would be able to handle that though. Like if you died in your avatar's body, would you die in would your brain think you're dead?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And if
obviously
not,
this is very hypothetical.
This is so hypothetical.
But if you could transfer consciousness even with your dead avatar body, you could transfer consciousness back.
Okay, cool. So let's say you can come back. What about carrying that trauma? Like, especially the amount of times you die. Man, I've died like 12 times and now I carry all that weight with me. Like, shit, dude.
Would you lose respect for life?
Absolutely.
I think
because
so
it becomes cheap. Because there's no risk. Oh, whatever. It's just like, I don't respect people when I play Call of Duty. Because I'm just killing their avatar. It's not real death. It's not real life.
And I know
that's
they're just going to respawn. They literally get another avatar 10 seconds later.
God, I hope this is not the future. Because then, like...
You're right. What a good analogy, though.
It's contained to a video game. How did we get here? Anyway, we're here. Let's go for it. It's contained to a video game and you can walk away from it. But if that becomes real life, where it's just you're here and you can spend... If you've got the capital for it, you've got another body you hop into. And it doesn't matter. There's no risks, especially if you can find a way to disconnect whatever you're doing in that avatar from your consciousness back at home. Man, like, talk about crime you could get away with.
Oh, yeah, because how do you identify which consciousness is in this specific avatar?
And how do you tell when you go off, like, on your purge spree that you're killing avatars or people?
Here's a question for you. We're talking about avatars in the physical world.
Yeah.
But it doesn't even necessarily have to be a physical world. It could be the literal matrix. And if it's designed well enough, then you have your brain doesn't have a way to differentiate between a virtual world and a physical world. Yeah, I don't know. So we were talking about how you get that sense of community, without risking your life.
I like that idea. If you guys have any solutions or ideas, we'd love to hear them. So if you jump into any of our social media platforms, we got Instagram, 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗲, Twitter, 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗃. We're on YouTube as well. I don't know if we've set that one up fully yet, but we'll be there by the time this goes live. And then also on the website. What's the name of the website again?
That's a good question. We'll find out. We'll have it in another episode. In the intro episode that gets kicked off.
There you go. We'll have the website there.
We built the website, but I don't think that we've got an actual URL yet.
That's right.
We do. We purchased it.
Yeah, I don't think the website's fully built yet. So we're talking future state. But future state, there'll be a spot on the website to request future topics or suggestions, stuff like that. But the whole idea of this is obviously we're curious and we just explore crazy stuff. And
you might say that we explore bold minds.
Hey, there you go. Self-plug there. No shame whatsoever.
And hey, on that note, we certainly do not have the bold minds. So, part of this podcast is to learn and grow with each other and with the audience. So we definitely rely on audience engagement to help us fully fledge out all of our ideas. And we come into each one of these episodes and topics with, we all have our own opinions. So I go into it with my opinion. Tony, you come in with your opinion. And sometimes we're on the same page. Sometimes we're on differing pages. But throughout the learning process, as we're researching these topics and learning more about what other people are saying, I discover a lot, just like I was talking about the lady who had the different take than I did on cities.
Yeah.
The professor who felt like, we were just going to gravitate right back to cities as soon as this pandemic is over. And she very well may be right. I think that there's a strong possibility that does happen. And so it gets you thinking about the other perspective. Mm-hmm. That wasn't my position. And so it was interesting to listen to her and hear it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you continue to listen, you're going to find more and more of that perspective stuff. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is that my perspective is super awesome, but so is everyone else's. And the better, more detailed picture I can get is when you apply all of those different perspectives. And even if you don't agree with them, subscribe with them, sometimes that contrast can make something even more attractive, appealing, beautiful, whatever word you want to use there. So, yeah. Now that we've rambled a little bit, is there anything else we need to cover on this, or is that a good spot to wrap this up, man?
Well, I actually did have a couple more.
Let's do it.
Topics.
Let's do it.
I just wrote down because, full disclosure, this is our first episode that we're recording. It may not be the right release order per se, but
this is Easter egg
that we're recording. So yeah, it's exciting. So I wasn't sure how long we were going to be able to go on this particular outline of, just throwing together a couple ideas on some paper. One of the ideas, if you look at some of the other topics here, did cities cause COVID? So almost counter to the actual topic of this episode, which is COVID's impact on cities. It's like, well, could COVID have even occurred without the cities? Think about that community spread.
Yeah.
Would this have happened?
Full disclaimer, I'm not an epidemiologist, if that's how you say that.
Epidemiologist.
Thank you. See, I don't even know how to say the word. Proof that I'm not that. So man, I don't even know. And there's so many, if you look online, there's so many different opinions that all seem factual from the person who's saying it's perspective, whether it is or not. But I don't even know.
Yeah, how do you keep track of that? And I'm not sure that anybody will be able to prove it, especially when you think about, well, how would you prove this? You would prove it by putting together some epidemiological models. But even those models were obviously very flawed whenever we were looking at the spread of COVID-19. I mean, I heard, I don't know how many different models, but it was every day you go to any different source and it's like a US sustained model. It's a global model. It's a model that some of the Chinese researchers had been putting together, and 1 in 12 hit, so how can you even model this and actually figure out what's going on? I'm speaking out of ignorance here because I haven't researched the actual modeling or anything, but that's my perception. That's what it felt like to me was, I don't know how you tell, but, it's definitely true that this virus is extremely contagious, and it seems to not be very contagious outside. And so it makes you wonder if all those people that are living in close quarters with one another, and especially the countries that don't have as much space in their downtown areas where people might be more compacted, favelas, you might even say.
That's why New York had such a struggle, because people are just stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, and now I think you're starting to see the South is definitely much more spread out, but the South has a problem where nobody accepts wearing a mask. And so it's
nobody listens. Nobody's like, I'm good. I can do whatever I want, Yeah.
And so you might see two different reasons that COVID is really taking off in New York originally, because people were packed and crammed together, and then here in the South because we're not taking the precautions that we could otherwise. So yeah, I think it's a tough one to really figure out and explore, but I think it's definitely true. I shouldn't say definitely because I don't literally mean that, but it seems that it would be true that without these major metropolitan areas that you wouldn't have as much spread of COVID.
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is my personal experience of obviously being here in Nashville. I've got, my parents back home in Wisconsin, and they live in a tiny little town, and I can see the difference in experience that I have versus they have, and other people in different places, but I don't know, man. It's just a great big question mark. No fucking clue.
Do you know anybody that's gotten COVID?
Personally, no.
Same.
It's a couple layers.
Mm-hmm.
So I know people who know people who know people, or I know people who know people. But yeah, no firsthand people that I know that are in my life.
Yeah, the closest that I know is third hand. Yeah, so it's interesting. And maybe that's because, we're in Nashville, and it took a while for there to really be a significant impact here compared to some other hotspots. But now I think the last that I heard, it's just been exploding in Nashville. So it's not a good thing.
Right.
Certainly not. A couple other topics. Pollution. You know, the impact that COVID had on pollution. We talked about the cities and think about all those people that aren't driving anymore.
Like, do you see the thing about the dolphins coming into Venice? Like, holy shit. Like, I want to go to Venice now and see the dolphins.
How badass is that?
Yeah. I mean, but granted, by the time all this kicks back off, the water will be shit again. And
by the time we can go to Venice and see the dolphins, like,
the dolphins will have been gone. Yeah. But no, I think that's super cool. And so despite there being all of the drawbacks and the uncertainties and like the potential economic instability that's brought to a lot of different places, I think from a health perspective for the earth, like shit like that, it goes, all right, man, we gotta think about what we're doing here. Like so many different, like just Venice, other places like where the water's just cleared up. Man, we gotta do better. But when obviously our whole engine of our world economy, like in certain places came to a screeching halt. So it was forced to stop, right? How do we redirect that so that it doesn't keep, polluting the waters and raping the earth of its resources?
Yeah, it's interesting because without having that stark contrast where, we've gradually gotten accustomed to the world and what it looks like. If you grew up in LA and didn't really leave LA, you probably wouldn't notice the haze.
Yeah. It's just normal.
But if you fly into LA, you see it like 100%. There's no doubt about it. And so, that's one example of a reminder here, but this global example is something that like you start seeing these major changes and like the dolphins returning and it's like, oh, hey, we are way far removed from the natural beauty that this world provides.
Yeah. So how do we get back, right? Because I know you got all sorts of different interests wanting to get back to the way things were, right? So how do you incentivize people who are making billions of dollars on oil to have a different way? And I think that's why we've seen some struggle with, shit like Tesla getting off the ground, with like electric cars and stuff, because it puts all of that huge oil industry at risk. And I mean, if you're looking at it from, you take any type of altruism or morality out of it and you think just about yours and your own, well, of course I'm going to do whatever it can to shut down any threat to my income and my stuff. That makes sense.
Yeah, protect yourself.
So how do we incentivize those things that are not helping us as a society as much as we'd like them to, or are having too many drawbacks, like the pollution and shit like that? How do we incentivize those people to change?
Yeah. One thing I want to be careful of is like we say that if let's say you own an oil business, you want to do what you can to protect your business. And of course, 100% understand that. The flip side though, I think is that on an individual level, you can look at what the betterment of the world is and start with a purpose. Mm-hmm. So like if your purpose is to improve the world and part of that is environmental issues, then I think you need to start looking at your business and how you make it more environmentally friendly. And that's on like an individual level. You can do government regulations and all of this different stuff, but that it complicates the matters. I think anybody that follows any semblance of politics sees that these environmental issues complicate things.
Well, it's the difference between inspiration and mandating something, right?
Yes.
When people are mandating it, it's, I have to do this, I don't care, whatever. I'm going to just check the boxes to get it done, but it's missing the essence of what you're doing. And so even though you're checking boxes, you might not actually be hitting the mark. So how do we inspire people? Incentivize was the wrong question to ask. How do we inspire people to do better while still protecting their own?
It takes real leadership. You talked about that's the difference between being able to like force somebody to do something, mandate somebody to do something and inspire them.
Yeah.
Well, that's the difference between a leader and a boss. Like if we have real leaders that can lead by example and do the things that we should be doing as a country, as a world. Why limit it to just the United States?
Yeah, for sure.
Then that's definitely something that I think would take off. Here's another catch, just while we're thinking about the global perspective here, because these environmental issues are very much an issue of, what's the right way to phrase this? So people only start caring about environmental issues at a certain GDP threshold. So if you're an impoverished country,
You don't give a shit.
you care. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
Sorry if I said that wrong. But you've got that hierarchy of needs that says, hey, until I've got food and shelter taken care of, I don't care about environmental issues because I've got to survive first to care about those.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
And so maybe part of this is intrinsically ground in a poverty issue.
That's an interesting take I didn't think about. Yeah, I've got like 15 different thoughts that I could like go down rabbit holes, but it all weaves into other topics I know we have. So I'm like,
well, honestly, I think that this could almost be a topic in and of itself, is like environmental issues. Like, I mean, you could just keep it a broad statement like that, but how does poverty impact it? Or what are these different factors that come in? And how did we get to this point where some people care about the environment, some people don't? It's definitely polarizing, especially when you consider if that's an accurate hypothesis.
Yeah.
That you have to have defeated poverty, so to speak. Obviously, you know, America has its fair share of poverty-stricken areas, but across the board, generally speaking, it's not a huge issue in the United States. And so to get back onto what I was going to say is, if you're a business and you have to be economically sound, and the way to do that is by being environmentally not friendly, well, you almost have to be able to do that if that's the only way to get out of poverty, in order to get on the other side of that argument, which is that you have to care about the environment. Did that make sense? I feel like I danced around that a bit.
It did, but I'm a visual person, so I just visualized all that. So let us know if we're confusing as hell right now.
I'll try summarizing it. So if you're a business and you want to do good for the economy, maybe the best thing for the economy is to not care about the environment, because you can dump waste wherever it is instead of taking on the expenses to properly dump waste in an environmentally friendly way. Well, you have to be able to have that good economy in order to even care and do things to tackle the environmental issues to begin with. It's almost like a cycle.
Yeah. And so it's almost like caring about the environment is like a next level issue. Not that if you don't, it's not egotistical, better than, less than, whatever, but like you have to have a certain amount of shit accomplished before you can even have that on your radar.
Yeah. Like we're leveling up.
Yeah. That's interesting. Cause I'll be honest, man, there was times where I would hear people talk about the environment and I'm like, why do you care? Just live your life.
Sure.
And now I'm like, man, I care about the turtles.
100%.
Let's go clean up the trash in the ocean. You know, like I really care about that now.
Yeah. Did you hear about that guy that had like a plastic eating bacteria?
What?
Yeah. I think he was like a young guy, designed this bacteria, or maybe found this bacteria. I don't know the details, but it's some bacteria that eats plastic, and it's like, can we just throw that in the ocean?
Yeah.
Walk away, be done.
Or like all the landfills.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause don't get me wrong, plastic has been amazing and it's served its purpose, and there's like a lot of really cool shit we can do because of it.
3D printing,
all of our technology. Awesome. I mean, like these laptops here, we couldn't have made that without plastic. The pieces to hold it all together, or the lightweightness of it.
It's cost effective.
Food storage containers, fucking everything, you know, has plastic in it one way or another, but we need a way to get rid of it.
Yeah. We don't know what to do. Somebody help. One of the things that I think is really terrible is that we put all of our food waste into plastic garbage bags, and then we throw them in the landfills. And well, what would happen otherwise if you just threw your waste without the plastic bags? Well, at least then animals can get to it and break it down, and
yeah, it'll decompose for the most part.
Well, now you surround it in plastic, and it's like all these small little micro environments.
Yeah, dude.
It's tough.
That is tough.
And I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. I'm not necessarily advocating that we forego environmental issues to have more profits and more economic output. That wasn't my point, but it was more of like a thought exercise of
historically how we got here. You do have
to, if you look at countries, the countries that have environmental policies are the ones that have a certain level of GDP per capita. I think it was like 5,000 or 15,000 US dollars per person is what the per capita threshold was. I saw it recently.
That's crazy. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's super cool. I know you've got long-term travel on here, man.
Yeah, you know what? This is funny because this was not planned at all. I went back down and looked at these other topics that we threw down here, and we've got virtual avatars literally listed.
That's hilarious.
I had forgotten that I wrote that.
Well, it came up in conversation, and I talked about people and life would be Call of Duty. But yeah, like long-term travel. I mean, we watched all the airlines get hit pretty hard.
Massively.
I know, you had mentioned the difference of like companies, sending people out to do stuff. And I know some of that's picked up a little bit just out of necessity and people who've not figured out a different way to do what they do. And then you've got other people who are, maybe a little unafraid of, getting the virus themselves. And they're like, you know what, screw it. Airfare's cheap right now, vacation time. But still, that's a minority. Airlines aren't packed like they used to be. Even, I got to assume like car rental places, hotels and stuff, all of it. How does that stuff get sustained? What's the tipping point that stuff stops? How do they pivot? Like Airbnb stuff, that used to be a surefire. Oh man, let me just buy a house and throw it on Airbnb. It's on the beach in Florida and it's a cash cow. Yeah, now it's like a hole.
Yeah, so I had to go out to San Diego last month, I guess 2 months ago now. And it was for a wedding. My girlfriend's best friend was getting married. And so that was a big event for us to go out there. But our Airbnb had like COVID specific policies. You had to leave the windows open when you left to let everything air out. They had like a specific cleaning service that came in and did all of this. And so it was a little bit more expensive because of that additional cleaning that people have to take on. But yeah, it's been tough. And those are just the people who rent out their homes through Airbnb, but Airbnb as a company, they had to lay off quite a few people from what I understand. And the nice thing is that they gave everybody their work laptops and told them they could keep them. And
that's nice.
Sounds like they did them pretty well given the circumstances.
Sure.
It still sucks to be laid off though.
Well, 100%. Absolutely. But the hey, we didn't expect this. I'm so sorry. Here's a laptop. Like at least there was effort there.
They also had some different like HR policies that would help you build up your resume. And because, all of these businesses are intertwined with other big businesses.
Sure.
And so they leverage their network from their executives to go find employment for the rest of their team. So that's
if I wasn't an Airbnb fan before, I am now. I love
Shout out
shit.
to Airbnb.
Yeah. like they're listening.
Right. We don't own stock of Airbnb. Let's be honest.
Give me 10 minutes.
None of that. I think the last thing that I had here that I thought was an interesting idea, I actually wrote it down while we were talking about the commuting to cities and how things were, I don't want to say fall apart. That's what I started to say, falling apart in the cities. But less people are interested in living in the cities. And it's this notion that the housing prices in suburbs is actually going up as a result of COVID. And you might throw in the riots that have been happening here in the United States as well. The attraction to the concept that, well, I can go get a 800, 600 square foot studio apartment and pay through the nose, you're going to pay an easy $1,500 to $2,000 a month here in Nashville. And
Sure.
you look at San Francisco or New York, and it's just incredible. It's unbelievable. But that's a lot less attractive when you're confined to that 600 square foot studio apartment and you don't get the perks of being able to walk down to your favorite bar and get to enjoy the live music that's downtown and all of that stuff. And then you throw in the riots on top of that. You open up your front door and somebody's bashing a window in. It's like, I'm looking at the suburbs.
And tear gas and like, yeah, absolutely. And then, like you said, I think it's all about that investing in the space you're going to be spending your time in. Why buy a house if you're out all the time? It makes sense to, you know what? I have this tiny place. It's a place that I can chill on my one day a week that I chill for my personality. And I'm just going to sleep and do laundry here. And every night I'm going to be out and whatever. And if I like to drink and I probably shouldn't be driving because of how much I drink, I can just walk home every night. It's perfect.
100%.
Now, all the perks, my whole lifestyle has stopped. Oh, they'll be back in a couple weeks. It's now 6 months later. All right, screw it. I'm out. My lease has come up. I'm out. Let me go buy a house. Right. I've been putting it off. Let me change, my lifestyle. Let me go buy a house. I don't know how many people I know of this year since this all has started going, yeah, I just bought a house.
Really? That's exciting.
Yeah, I can think of 3 off the top of my head.
Really? Yeah, I'm not sure that I can think of anybody that's done that. Well, you know what? I shouldn't say that. One of my coworkers has a house, but also rented an apartment, just some personal things going on.
Sure.
And so as soon as COVID happened, he was like, screw the apartment. Like, I'm going back to my house.
Right.
And so he just kind of left it vacant for a month or two. I don't know how long. But yeah, I mean, you see that trend there. So he kind of fits that category. Yeah, I purchased my house more for like investment purchases, but it had me second guessing, like, is this really what I want? And it wasn't until COVID, as I said earlier, that I started appreciating it and actually fixing things up the way that I wanted it and spending time, giving it the time and attention that it needed, because prior to this, I was out all the time and I was like, well, I could go hang out with friends and
by the time I get home,
stupid stuff.
6, 7, 8, 9, 12 o'clock at night, you're not going to start thinking about, putting in the pond that you put in. Like,
right.
Nah, man, I don't got time to even think about that, much less try to plan it out or, dig a hole. Like, nah.
Yeah, that was like week 4 of quarantine. I was like, all right, we're doing some landscaping, throwing a pond here, do some plants and stuff. Yeah, it's just different level of appreciation. But obviously that comes with the sacrifice of not being able to have those face-to-face interactions with our friends and the people that we care about, and try new restaurants. And, that's a big part of my life.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. New restaurant. When was the last time I was at a new restaurant? San Antonio Taco Company.
Yeah, Satco.
Very beginning of this whole quarantine stuff. Brad was on my team, and we were doing some work together. He had actually come to the house for the work that we had to do, and he's like, man, I want tacos. And I'm like, all right, whatever, bro. And so he introduced me to that.
We got some damn good tacos.
Dude, that's been since March.
Fajitas and stuff.
Since I've been to a new restaurant.
Yeah, I think that I'd be in the same boat with you if I hadn't discovered this. It's called California Tacos, and I mean, it is like a food stand. Like, they've got like 12 square feet that they're slinging burritos out of.
Is that a local place around here?
In Hendersonville, yeah.
Okay.
And like it's I shit you not, it's this like, it's an actual building. So when I say stand, it's not like a lemonade stand, but it's in the middle of a parking lot.
Really?
Like, out in front of a strip mall. Like, I don't know what it was originally, but it's this little bitty building in the middle of the parking lot. And they made like a little drive through, and they've been slinging burritos. But I heard about it. My stepmom told me about it. And I had just gotten back from San Diego, and I was like, I had this, for anybody that doesn't live where there's real good Mexican food, a California burrito is not a California burrito. You have to be somewhere by the border to get a real California burrito. I learned. It took a while. But so I was kind of complaining about this to my stepmom, and she was like, you should go try out California tacos. So I went down there, and sure shit, I mean, they were on the money. Still a little bit off, but it was spectacular.
One of these nights that I come up here to do this podcast thing, we're gonna have to get some tacos.
Absolutely, 100%. It's some good stuff.
I'm sold.
Well, man, I think it's been a good conversation. We talked about a lot of different ideas here. One last thing, just to stimulate a little bit more conversation, and maybe it's something that I'd be curious to hear anybody who listens to this and might be a restaurant owner. I'm interested in how you're surviving.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that most restaurants have figured out that their wait staff can wear a mask, they can space out the tables and maintain some level of business, but it's still not normal.
Right.
You still can't have a full business. So yeah, I'm curious to hear beyond that, what other businesses have started to do. And as we were talking, I thought about one strategy that I did see a local business here in Hendersonville
Let's hear it.
do. She partnered with another restaurant that does food trucks.
Okay.
So it was the 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗃 Cafe.
Okay.
And they've got a food truck. And so, well, hey, the food truck in and of itself is a great way to diversify your restaurant business if you can do it.
Sure.
And
Aren't those like a couple $100,000 to like get up and running though?
I'm sure they are, but in the grand scheme of like a whole restaurant.
Fair. Okay.
I don't know what it takes to build out a restaurant. I'm not in the industry.
Yeah, I'm just
but
thinking
sure
about my
it's
bank
expensive.
going like, bro, I don't have $300,000 to start a taco truck.
Good luck.
Anyways, continue.
So she must have called 𝗟𝗟𝘀𝘁𝗃 Cafe up and was like, hey, what do you think about driving your food truck out here? You can park it in my parking lot. And even though it's a competing business, well, hey, that saves there's only one 𝗟𝗟𝘀𝘁𝗃 Cafe for those that aren't familiar with the area. And
Wasn't it an Elvis place or something?
I'm not sure the history, but it's a popular,
Yeah, it's famous for something.
famous place. Yeah. I'm not sure the reason why. But yeah, so even though like obviously people are going to come to 𝗟𝗟𝘀𝘁𝗃 Cafe, the food truck, and not buy the other businesses, the actual businesses' food, well, she makes a ton of money off of beer sales. It's one of the only spots that has a really broad, wide-ranging selection of beers and alcohols and liquors. And so it's like, yeah, you come get your 𝗟𝗟𝘀𝘁𝗃 Cafe. You don't have to drive an hour across town to go get it, literally. And we'll come to you. You pick up a couple beers, enjoy. Maybe some people say, hey, I'll get some 𝗟𝗟𝘀𝘁𝗃 Cafe. And some people say, I'll get some Thai food.
And now it's a pretty good synergy.
It's mutual.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Huh. That's
And
creative.
it was super, super packed when I went. I showed up and it was only like 2 hours into it and the food truck had run out of food.
I believe it.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like
Dude,
I was bummed.
Have you ever had 𝗟𝗟𝘀𝘁𝗃 Cafe, like their biscuits?
Yeah,
Oh my God.
they're delicious.
Like,
That's where I had chicken and waffles for the first time.
So when I came down here, I don't think I've ever had chicken and waffles.
They're pretty good.
But everyone was like, oh my God, Southern biscuits. And I'm like, guys, I've had biscuits.
Yeah, I know what a biscuit is.
Y'all need to chill out. And it wasn't until I had 𝗟𝗟𝘀𝘁𝗃 Cafe biscuits that I thought to myself, all right, I get it.
Yeah. Oh, they're fantastic.
Yeah.
You'll die. You have 2 or 3 of them and you're dead.
Yeah.
From either the dehydration because it absorbs all the water, or the pounds of butter that is in the half-ounce biscuits.
Or because I was at the actual cafe the one time I was out there.
Mm-hmm.
And don't they have like homemade like jams and jellies and stuff too?
Oh yeah.
And you just smear, oh my,
It's so good.
I'm so hungry right now. My mouth is so hungry. I'm not really hungry, but
It's game time, baby.
let's get it.
So Tony, I think we had a good discussion here. What was your biggest takeaway?
For me, I think, we talked about pruning and how sometimes that's healthy because it allows you to cut off the dead stuff so good stuff can come in. But sometimes like you got to be intentional with that pruning. And so I think if we're looking at the kind of the economic impact of this pandemic and how a lot of things have changed, different people are not in the habit of throwing their money, time, and investment in certain places, and how some of those things could kind of disappear. I think my biggest takeaway is that I'm going to try to be much more intentional about thinking through in 2 years, what are the things that I want to be around? Or 6 months, whenever we go back to the office and life goes back to normal, whatever that is, whenever that happens, going, oh, the stuff I've learned to live without, is that good? Is that good pruning in my life that I'm good without it? Or is it something that I want to return? And if it does return, how do I invest in it and help sustain it for the time being so that it's there when I can access it again? And so whether that be like live concerts or musicians, you know, if they can't keep making music, how do I support them now so that they can keep making music and I can go see them live in 2040 or whatever?
Yeah. And so, you know, that music industry is definitely a big hurdle for us to figure out because it's all been subsidized so heavily by, you know, Spotify or Apple Music or Google Play Music, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It takes away from that, you know, back when I was 10, I would say I'd go out and buy the CDs, and prior to that, people were buying the records, and you might only want one or two songs, but you bought the whole album. And so it was really supporting those artists. And now there's not really an easy way to do that.
Well, it used to be through all of the events. It was all through events. That's how bands made money, was through events. And then Big Money figured that out, and they started making all the money there. And so then it was all through merch, right? Mm-hmm. Like bands only made money through merch because they made shit off of their music anymore. And so live events was to sell their merch. So now they're not out there being able to do what they do. So maybe it's just me buying more band merch. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and I think you really hit it on the head here. You got to think about what you're okay living without moving forward. So for me, it's restaurants. I love going out to eat. I think I said that at the start of the episode. Yeah. And go out, try new restaurants. Always like being somewhere new, trying new things, meeting new people. And I definitely have a few local restaurants that are my staples. I mentioned the Thai restaurant. And that's a place that I definitely want to support. It's not always as easy as it used to be to go get the stuff that I want to get.
Right.
But I'll go out of my way and take the extra effort. If I can save time commuting, maybe I'll invest it into those local businesses that I care about.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Right on.
Well, cool. I think we're at a spot where we can just wrap this one up.
I think so too.
It's been awesome to get this podcast started and up off the ground. So appreciate everybody for listening in. Again, you know, we thrive off of engagement with people and hearing all of the different ideas that people have, like what we just said. And I hope that somebody's listening to this, and maybe that's your reward for making it to the end of the episode. If you're a business owner, maybe that's an idea that helps you sustain your business and make sure that things are going better for you.
Yeah.
And it was mutual.
Yeah. The whole thing is like, we discussed, you know, how to fix that community thing. So, hit us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. That was one I didn't mention earlier. All the normal big social media platforms were there.
I heard that we can't have a TikTok.
We're going to end right there.
Cheers. Thanks everybody for listening.